Hi, thank you for joining me today for our 5-minute Bible study. I hope you're all doing well today. We're going to go back and look at verses 3 through 8 one more time. And the reason we're going to do that is because we've been taking these verses one at a time. First, we've looked at verse 3, then we looked at verse 4, then we looked at verse 5. And that's important. We need to do that. We need to get into every verse, read the words, understand what the Greek is, understand what the words mean, and these are very important things for us to do. And so we have done that, but if we just do that, we kind of actually miss the bigger picture. We miss the whole idea of what the writer is trying to tell us. And so what we need to do is now go back and put those things together. We call that context. We call that context because we want to understand, what does this sentence mean based on the words or before it and the words after that. There's different types of context. There's context like historical context, like cultural context, like literary context. And so there's different types of context. We've given some historical context already back in the introduction, and we're going to continue to give historical context as we go through. But right now, what we want to do is take a look at the immediate context. The immediate context says, these are the words we've just read. What do the words before it mean? What do the words after it mean? What does a sentence as a whole mean? What does the paragraph mean? What's the thought here? So that's what I want to do now, is get an understanding of what the thought is in this sentence, which is verses 3 through 8. If we look at it, we notice, number one, that right off the bat, it's Paul giving thanks to God. So we can understand that this is a thanksgiving. So that's number one. But what else is there to glean from this sentence? Well, why is Paul giving thanksgiving? Because Paul could have just said, we give thanks to God for you. But he does so much more. He gives this long 5-verse sentence. So what does he say in those 5 verses? Basically, what we notice is that 2.5 of those 5 verses are the gospel. He's talking about the gospel, the truth of the gospel, the power of the gospel, the impact that the gospel has had on the Colossians. So really, he's talking about the gospel. That's the context, the main context of 3 through 8. Now, if we read a little bit further, we get some more subcontext in there. We recognize that because of the gospel, the Colossians have hope. And because of the gospel, the Colossians have faith. And because of the gospel, the Colossians are able to love properly. So Paul thanks God for the gospel that has given the Colossians the opportunity to have this hope, this faith, and this love that they didn't have before the gospel showed up. So that's the main context right there. And that thought is going to continue on as we move into the next portion of Colossians in verse 9. But on a bigger picture, we take that immediate context and we move it out a little bit. And we remember when we spoke about the historical context, that part of the reason Paul is writing this letter to the Colossians is that there are false teachers coming into the church to teach them wrong things. Their teaching is the gospel's good, but you need to add these things that you have to do. The gospel's good, but you have to add these things that you have to believe. And so these false teachers are coming in with a lot of buts, with a lot of things that the Colossians have to believe and the Colossians have to do. And Paul starts off this letter with the gospel. In other words, he's basically telling them in verse 3 through 5, look what you have because of the gospel. Because of the gospel, you have a hope and a faith and a love that you didn't have before. So what we see here in this context is Paul's writing to thank God that this gospel that came from Epaphras is having power and impact on the Colossian church in such a way that they don't need all these other things that the false teachers trying to add to them. So that's basically the context. When we read it all together, we understand what all these sentences mean. When we put them together, understand the thought, recognize what the historical context was, what the cultural context was, and understand the immediate context around these verses we've been reading, and we know that this is what's going on. So we're going to leave it there today. We're going to continue with verse 9 next. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments. I will be happy to get back to you as soon as I can to answer as many questions as I can. Thank you very much for joining me. God bless you.